Hello and welcome, this is Eric from AD Racing Central. Antigraviator racing may be a subgenre, but that doesn't mean we don't have quite a large number of games to play, both by ourselves and online. I thought it was about time that I made a ranking video on the top 10 antigraviator racing games that you can play right now. Let's get started. I want to be clear from the start that how much you like the games on this list is of course dependent on a number of factors, like if you're more of an F-Zero than a Wipeout fan, for example. I encourage you to check out any games on the list that interest you and look at the ranking as a reflection of my own personal preference. Also, I've limited the list to games that have had full releases and that have been released in modern times, from 2016 and beyond. Number 10 is Antigraviator from Cybernetic Walrus. This is a game that looks like Wipeout but plays more like F-Zero. The tracks are long with wide corners and the speeds are incredibly high, and everything takes place in a setting very familiar to the genre, with humans colonizing the solar system and inevitably deciding to place death-defying racetracks everywhere. The core gameplay in this title is very solid, with tight controls and varied track design. There's a barrel rolling mechanic for messing with fellow racers, and also a campaign with progression towards unlocking new ships and parts. What prevents Antigraviator from ranking higher on my list is partly because of the game's trap system. That's just not all that exciting, since you rarely see your opponents get trapped, and the money you gain from winning races is just not balanced to what the upgrade parts cost. That being said, Antigraviator is a fun and cheap title with really solid graphics and a slick frame rate. Number 9 on my list is Flashout 3 from developer Jujubee. This game marks the console debut of the series, and the gameplay will feel familiar to every Wipeout veteran. What's not familiar is the game's very unique ships that mixes bold design choices with colorful neon lights. Prepare to dish out some hurt if you decide to pick this one up, because Flashout 3 has a strong emphasis on combat. All ships have an energy attribute that determines the amount of equipment you can bring to a race, and while different weapons are the most plentiful, defensive options like shields and turbos are also available. All ships also have several different versions with slightly altered stats, which is a really nice feature in my opinion. This game is enjoyable for sure, even though the gameplay just isn't as refined as the top games in the genre. Flashout 3 does however have a lengthy campaign with lots of unlocks, and the aforementioned loadout system is a highlight as well. On number 8 we find F-Zero 99. This game was shadow dropped last year, which was a big move since it was years ago we saw the last entry in Nintendo's classic racing franchise. A retro-styled, online-only AD Racing Battle Royale game was maybe not what the fans primarily wanted, and definitely not what we expected, but the game turned out to be surprisingly enjoyable. 99 racers duke it out on a modern version of a classic track, with the last racers getting eliminated every lap. The controls are fluid and responsive, and only the best players can manage their health/boost meter to perfection. According to me, the best thing about this game is the mechanics that makes the game fun even if you're in the back of the pack, as here you have more opportunities to advance to the obstacle-free Skyway, where you travel above all other racers. Every race you also get compared to a couple of rivals that are other players of a similar skill level. Even if it does get a bit monotonous after a while, F-Zero 99 is worth checking out, as it's available for all Nintendo Switch Online subscribers. In 7th place we find Trailblazers from developer Supergunk. The crazy art style and wild vehicle design is definitely what sets this game apart. The game has a story mode with several wacky characters that all pilot a unique ship each. The track design is also varied and very colorful. Speaking of color, it's also the game's main gameplay mechanic, as Trailblazers is a team-based racing game. Each racer can spray the track in their team's color, and any teammate who flies above it gets a significant speed boost that also stacks, adding up to some really high speeds. This also means that you have to plan ahead on where you place your color stripes to give you the optimal speed boost on the second and third lap. And if you're feeling more aggressive, you always have the option of shooting all your ink at an unsuspecting opponent. If you want to try an anti-gravity racing game that looks and sounds like nothing else, Trailblazers is your game. If unique and colorful is your thing, another game from the same developer might be something for you as well. I'm talking about the Warp Drive that I placed on 6th place. This is an offline-only experience, but it's a meaty one. You have several options for playing by yourself, and everything you do gives you credits that you can spend in the game's in-game store. However, this comes with a twist, as the things you can buy are randomized and only a limited selection is available after each race, which adds a lot of suspense to the game's progression. Gameplay-wise, Warp Drive controls really well, and the drifting mechanic from Mario Kart is present here as well. The energy you pick up during the races can be used for boosting or shooting missiles or laying out a mine, but also for warping. On several spots on the track, warp points are presented that lead you to a more advantageous route through the track. Managing your resources for what's the most appropriate takes some skill for sure, and Warp Drive is a solid title for several hours of fun. FastRMX from Shin'en Multimedia, which we find in 5th place, is a Switch exclusive title and the closest we come to a modern F-Zero game. Most of the things you'd expect to find in Nintendo's legendary franchise are present here as well, including a side-shifting attack and a large selection of ships. There's also many tracks to race on, which all look beautiful, and the general performance of this 2017 title is remarkable considering the hardware it runs on. FastRMX has a phase-shifting mechanic, where you switch between the orange and blue phase depending on the circumstances. Being in the wrong phase while flying over a strip or passing through a gate slows you down significantly, and being in the right phase gives you a huge speed boost. The gameplay is incredibly fast as well, and if you're looking for a new F-Zero game, FastRMX is probably the game for you. If Wipeout is more your thing, then Pacer from R8 Games that I put in 4th place might be more your style. Perhaps this game didn't reach the heights of Wipeout, even though some old Psygnosis employees were part of the development team, but Pacer has enough going for it to put it at the upper half of my list. The game has a lengthy single-player campaign with increasing difficulty and a large number of very well-designed tracks. Pacer also features a loadout system where you pick 2 weapons each race that can also be modified. You also design the cosmetics of your chassis alongside a customizable performance loadout. The customizing is a bit convoluted and confusing, but the core gameplay is solid, and finding the perfect lines through the tracks can be really satisfying. For some reason the game is rarely on sale, but it might just be worth its $40 asking price if you ask me. We've reached the podium positions, and in 3rd place we find Redout 2 from 3-4 Big Things. There are people who hold the first game in high regard, but in my opinion, the sequel improved upon all things where it mattered the most. With the DLC, there are more than 40 tracks in the game, placed all around our solar system, and you'll learn the basics in an excellent tutorial. The campaign is incredibly lengthy, with a large amount of both cosmetic and performance unlockables, as well as new ships, and the ship customization options leave little to be desired. Gameplay-wise, Redout 2 features no weapons. Instead, you manage your 2 different boost types as well as pitching and strafing, and the control scheme has quite a lot of depth. The races will go at incredible speeds relatively early in the campaign, but to ease players into the experience, Redout 2 has plenty of assistance options. Standing out from both Wipeout and F-Zero, Redout 2 is one of the best and most ambitious anti-gravity racing games in recent years. On the runner-up position of best AD racing games to play right now, we find the retro-inspired Ballistic NG from Neognosis, released in 2016. As you can see, this game took more than a little inspiration from Wipeout, more specifically the first 3 games from the PS1 era. Actually, the game almost mimics the look and feel of Wipeout 3, including the drifty cornering and the health-draining afterburner. As long as you don't mind the retro graphics, it's hard to find flaws with this game. The frame rate is super slick, the ship controls are extremely tight, and the lengthy campaign gives you opportunities to unlock new liveries or any of the game's numerous different ships. Add to that BallisticNG is very cheap, still supported by its developer, and that you also find plenty of community-made mods, and you have a game that will not run out of content anytime soon. Make sure to try this one out. Before we move on to the number 1 spot, we have a couple of honorable mentions. Redout 1 is still available on several platforms, and some players actually prefer its gameplay over the predecessor. Grip Combat Racing is a racing game that breaks more than one genre formula, and it does also include anti-gravity racing features. The Next Penelope on Nintendo Switch is a very unique top-down anti-gravity racing game with several different interesting gameplay mechanics. On Steam you can find ArcRacer, another simplistic racer inspired partly by the Wipeout games of old. And finally, for Nintendo Switch Online subscribers, you have several F-Zero games available in the retro collections. And the game that takes the number 1 spot of AD racing games released in recent times is Wipeout Omega Collection. This is, in my opinion, one of the most timeless racing games ever made. It manages to look amazing still, while also running really well on older PS4 systems. Yes, it is a compilation of Wipeout HD Fury and 2048 that were both previously released, but that doesn't change how enjoyable these games still are. The controls are easy to learn, but also have an incredible amount of depth, and the game's sense of immersion with its ship and track design is also spot on. The online mode still attracts players for the more competitive of us, and the community surrounding the game still organizes tournaments from time to time. Wipeout Mega Collection strikes the perfect balance between casual and hardcore, and even if you don't have a nostalgic connection to the franchise, the game is still well worth checking out. If you want to take a look at promising upcoming anti-gravity racing titles, click on this video, and feel free to leave a comment if you disagree with me on any part of my list, or if you would have added another game. Thank you for watching. I am Eric from AD Racing Central, and I'll see you in the next video.